This is Lenny Torgerson. Today's engineering tips topic is supposed to be on OpenSite Lite. It's going to be hopefully the second part of my four-part series. Let's talk about what we did 2 weeks ago in OpenSite Lite Part 1. In OpenSite, as we left our intrepid group of travelers 2 weeks ago, we had created a civil container file to hold annotations. That's where we stopped. And the annotations that we have don't live in the civil container file. That's the file that I have open for you right now. This is the container file that displays the published file. Let me see if I can get my references dialog to pop open, and we can see that I've got a reference attachment to the default model of the published annotation file. That's actually where I use that command, annotate element, was in that other file. I'm simply displaying it here where I have control over the levels. This is a civil container file, so it has a self-reference attachment to the 3D model. Now, if you missed that, I want to pull open the webinar. We start with our civil container file with a default model, and we cause that file to create the 3D managed model using OpenSite Designer. We do that by attaching a terrain as a reference, and we set that terrain active. Then OpenSite will create this 3D model and it will attach it as a reference. Now, down in the discipline folders, you will see other published files that also have this managed 3D model. And what we tend to do in the container files is we attach to the published file of the same type. So if I've got an annotation container file, you will see it has a bunch of reference attachments to annotation published file. If I have a geometry container file, like I do showing in this discipline area, the geometry container file has a reference attachment to its geometry published file. These green reference attachments occur automatically by the OpenSite product. When you make the reference attachment to a civil published file, that 3D model will automatically be attached as a reference to the 3D model of your file, which is attached as a reference into your 2D model. This gives you access to the civil data from inside of your default model, which is 2D. It gives you access to the civil data so that you can do things like annotate it. I had talked about today looking at placing plan view annotations about station, offset, and elevation to get some information into these files, into an annotation file, or even into an OPNP file. Now, an OPNP file is a OpenSite or OpenRoads generated plan and profile file. It contains usually references to that civil data and annotations so that you could create products that you can actually print or create plans from. So I want to take a look at a document that I produced a while back. I have got the civil container files. We did that a couple weeks ago. Today, we're going to go through the OPNP file. And we're also going to use information that's found in this terrain document, elevation and profile information from terrains using OpenSite Designer. This is a pretty good document. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up a file, the OPNP file. We're going to set it up to use that 3D model. And this is all described in here. And then we're going to do some permanent profile labeling. I invite you on your own time to run through this. It's got a lot of steps that people who use OpenSite might take to analyze elevations from attached terrains. This is specifically for terrains. And then we'll look at other types of labeling and when we get inside the OPNP. So what I'm going to do now is shift back to the OPNP file and take you through this. I have already created the brand new OPNP file in ProjectWise from a 2D seed. It has to be created from a 2D seed. I've already created it for our work today in the number 2 plan sheets folder. So let's see how we can do the next steps. We're going to attach that terrain, we're going to set it active, and then we're going to attach a bunch of other civil container files, including that one that we created last time. Okay, let me minimize that, close that. All right, here we are. We happen to have the annotation-based container file open. I'm going to leave it open because I'm trying to minimize how many times I exit OpenSite and reopen. I wanted to point out to you that in the number 2 plan sheets for my key numbers 5 9s, I have just today created the OPNP 02. It's for our webinar today. And I'm selecting it with the dependency viewer on, and we can see that ProjectWise is unaware of any reference attachments. I haven't even opened it. So let's open this file and let's do the rest of what we need to prepare it as a civil container file. The OPNP file is another type of civil container file, as well as the cross-section base container file. They're both civil container files. All right, I already have ProjectWise open and the container file, so I'm going to use the file open, or maybe I'll use the file open. There we go. File browse is what it's called now. I'm already on the open section. So when I browse, I should be able to navigate up into the number 2 plan sheets folder and open up. This is not, is it sorted? It is sorted. There's the OPNP 2. I'm going to open that file. Now I'm prompted to restart. I know that I have not changed which key number I'm working in. So I am choosing to not restart so I don't have to reload the same work set. Typically though, you should always, when you get this question, ask yourself, did I just change key numbers? It's very safe bet to choose yes. Today, since things are running slow, I'm going to choose no. I'm going to go ahead and check in the annotation container file, and then it will open the OPNP file, and we'll check out its contents. So here's our OPNP file. It has one model. That's what I get, and it's 2D. It's a 2D model. So I need to begin by preparing this to be a civil container file. So I'm going to go to the References tab, and I'm going to attach a reference. The reference I'm going to attach is going to be to the terrain. It's in the number 6 civil data folder. It is a terrain base container file from survey. I'm going to choose interactive so that I get the next dialog box that asks me, do I want to live nest? The answer is I'm connecting to a container file which contains no data. It just has reference attachments. So I need to live nest to just depth of 1. And then I'm going to say OK. And I see a little, well, I missed it in my circle, but you see data there. There it is. Now, before I attach any other references, and I don't like to attach all of the references and then later make the thing a civil container file. I'm going to make it perform civil work right now. I attach the terrain, I select some element that's in the terrain. Could be a contour line. Here it's a perimeter. If I hover back over it, I get the pop-up window and I can choose Set as Active Terrain Model. If you have trouble with this hover menu, it just doesn't appear for you, you can actually right press. I'm going to right press and I get the right-click contextual menu, and at the very top, I see Set as Active Terrain Model. So I choose that. A couple of things happen when I do that. I have an additional model that has been created, which is 3D. That is an ORD managed model, which OpenSite it's an OpenSite managed model, which it just created because I set the terrain active. Now, it's also, I'm going to navigate into that 3D model by double-clicking on it. And you'll notice that my view now says I'm in the 3D model, and my application says I'm in a 3D model as well. It keeps track of where I'm at. A couple different places you can see. In this 3D model, if I fit the view, I actually see data, and you should. You should see data coming from the 3D model of the published terrain. And sure enough, if I look at the references, it has automatically made that reference attachment to the 3D model of the terrain. Automatically there. If I go back to my 2D model, it's automatically made a reference attachment. It's a self-reference to the 3D so that I can see the terrain. Not only see it, I am interacting with that data. The civil data, I have access to it. All right, next thing. I want to just quickly look at my instructions for my OPNP. Adjust your initial to level. Oh, I think I need to attach all of my other geometries and corridors. Let's do that. Don't want to forget that. In the 2D model, which is just simply called default, using the references dialog, I'm going to attach now from the civil data folder, number 6 civil data. I want to attach the annotation file, container file that I made a couple weeks ago. I also want to attach the corridor and the geometry. I already have the terrain, but that's it. Annotation, corridor, geometry. I do not need to click the add button. The add button is there if I need to travel to a different folder. I would add these here and then travel to another folder and add more. I don't need to do that. Just want interactive. Do I want interactive set anymore? I'm going to say no. The reason I don't want interactive set anymore, I'm just going to go to coincident world, is because I have already set live nesting depth of 1. I did that when I attached the terrain container file. That setting will be remembered until I fully exit OpenSite Designer and launch it again. And then it will be reset back to no nesting. So I don't need to, waste time identifying models, because this action, coincident world, is going to attach the default model of all of these, and they're automatically going to be seen in my 2D world. And I click OK. It says they don't belong to my active work set. That's because I've been importing some stuff from outside of ProjectWise. And yes, I want to continue. And we see that information in my 2D view. We can see those reference attachments have been made down in my 2D references. If I change models to the 3D, you'll see that all of the 3D reference attachments have been made automatically. I didn't have to make those. So this container file, this civil container file called an OPNP, is acting correctly and allowing me to see all of my information. I'm going to go back to the 2D model. What a lot of folks will do is they will double check that things are working well by changing their view. What we're taught in classes is you can check to make sure that your 3D stuff is coming through. Now, I already did that by navigating to the 3D model. But you can actually open up 2 views. One that's plan, which is 2D, and the other that's 3D. By selecting it off of, this is a right-click menu that's available in OpenSite Designer and OpenRoads. In the black space, if I just right-click, how about right press, view control, and I can open up two views. It automatically shows me, let me move this just a little bit. Just want to explain what you're seeing here. Notice the dark blue highlighting of the title bar for view 1. Also notice the name of the model that's displayed in view 1 is right there in the title bar. That's the default model, which we know is 2D. It's highlighted blue because it's the active model. I'm actually looking right now at two different models at the same time. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like opening a book and bringing one page up to the center so you can see both sides of the page at the same time, right? It's kind of like that. Notice the lighter blue highlighting over view 2. And notice that view 2 says that it's showing you the 3D model. You can make view 2 active simply by left clicking on the title bar, and watch what happens to the color. It activates that model. That's the active model. Anything that shows you information about the model, its reference attachments, will also show you which model is active. Notice down here, I happen to have left the models dialog open. When I simply left click between these two title bars, the green bar that indicates which model is active is going to move. So you keep your eyes. Well, after 2 seconds, it moved. So you can make a different model active. When a different model is active, you're seeing a different set of references. Right now I'm looking at the references to the 3D model. But if I choose the title bar for the 2D model, I am looking at the references to the 2D model. They are different. Just want to point that out. So I'm just going to reopen the references dialog and see if I can get the terrain to not be selected. There. So I selected white space and the terrain is not selected. So I had a little bit of a latency going on with my references dialog. The terrain was selected, even though it didn't display as selected. That can drive you nuts. It drives me nuts. All right. So here I have my default model. And in the default model is where you would normally place, if we were going to do some drawing production, we would place some named boundaries for drawing production. And we can do that in using OpenSite. You can also place some annotation right into the default model. If you want to, you can. What a lot of folks will do is they'll take this 2D view and they will toggle on and off levels, because there's stuff that I just don't need to see in my 2D view. So let me just show you a couple of those things, and I'm going to bring my level display dialog to the front, and I'm going to roll up the level display dialog so I am acting on all of the levels, no matter which reference attachment they're coming from. And because I have got my screen so, my resolution is set, I can't see which. Having trouble controlling things today. I want to narrow up my level name so that I can see the used. And when I sort by used in my level display dialog, I have the proposed at the top and existing at the bottom. And in the proposed, I've got all of these alignment levels. I've also should have some that are coming from the corridor. Down at the bottom, you'll notice I've got some design levels. They start with a D, and those are coming from the corridor. So I've got a corridor boundary and template range. I don't really need to see those. So I'm going to turn those off just by toggling them off in the level display dialog with all of the reference attachments rolled up. Now, all the gray means is that the state is different across some models, and we don't need to worry about that. Now, I'm going to go up to the proposed, and I'm going to toggle off some things that I don't need to see. I don't need to see the small scale ticks, and actually, what we did 2 weeks ago is we had annotated our alignment with yellow annotations, and it's using the ramp levels. So actually, I can toggle off all of the mainline levels. I don't need any of the mainline levels, I don't believe. Oops, I just toggled off the display of my mainline geometry. So that was silly. Let me show you how you get that back on. I just saw it go off. I can expand my hierarchy in the reference area of the level display, and I can select my my geometry. That's where my alignment comes from, and I can toggle the alignment back on. Notice I still have it collapsed a little bit because I can control what's coming from the published file right here from the container file. So I've got my alignment. And the reason I like the alignment to be displayed is in case I do any labeling that needs me to select the alignment. And then anyway, you can also select these things individually, and you can say, you know what, I really don't need to see any of these utilities coming from the terrain. I'm struggling with my brain. But I would leave most of the terrain display levels, leave them on in case we want to label anything from the terrain using that analyzing elevations and profile information. There was a section on labeling the terrain spots, and I'll just show you how we could do that fairly quickly and throw some annotation right here in the OPNP file. Now, before we do that, I also wanted to show you a couple of other things. In the landing page for the East website, we have an OpenSite Designer Quick Start. Just open that. And it has some suggestions for you if you haven't done this before. And there is a display the profile of the terrain. We'll get to that. We haven't gotten there yet. And cutting profiles. So there is information that we have presented in the past. Right now I have this PDF about elevation and profile information open. But there was a webinar where we did this before. 2 weeks ago, I did a webinar on part 1, and that is listed at the bottom of the quick start. So I just wanted you to know that that's there. Now on the user guide for Open Roads and OpenSite, there is a section here, 2 important sections that I want to point out. How to update your DGN file after a change to standards. We had a workspace update a couple of weeks ago, and if you need to know how to update the standards in your civil file, this is how you do it. It tells you the steps to go through. But today, I wanted us to know that there is recommendations about where to place annotations. And it tells you some recommendations. Do I put it in the design model of the OPNP like I've got? Do I put it in an annotation file? I can't tell you where to put your stuff. You can put it almost anywhere, but there's some good recommendations for how do you want this to appear on a sheet if you do want it to appear on a sheet. For example, if you have text like stationing that needs to appear in more than one sheet, it's just great to put that in a design type or a drawing type model. Typically, stationing text, I would put that in the design model of like that annotation file, like we did 2 weeks ago. That is exactly where I would put it. The other type of text that we might be looking at is text that we're going to place using the civil labeler. That would be plan text. So there's a whole paragraph about plan text, about where you might put that. And so some of the things like stationing, it says, can be put in the annotation pub file, like we did a couple of weeks ago. There's also text that you can, annotations you can put right into the drawing type and sheet type models that you create from the OPNP file. Lots of times when we label things, we want the label to appear right side up on a sheet. If it's that type of a label, then yeah, you should put it in a drawing type model or a sheet type model that you create from your OPNP. All right, where are we at? We are here. We've got some levels. I wanted to show you how to just display some information about profile from the terrain, which is attached as a read-only reference. We don't have to edit the terrain to display it. But what we do need to do is we need to be able to see things on the terrain that are a little bit differently than they're presented right now. Right now, this terrain, if I select it in my 2D view, I select the terrain, I get the properties of it displayed over in the properties, and it will tell me what feature it is using coming from the terrain file. So when the surveyor set this up, and that was me with some other hat on, I chose to display it existing boundary. That means it doesn't by default display contours. It only displays that perimeter line, which is so handy for me for setting it as the active terrain model. But what if I want to see some contours? Well, we do that with a thing called reference override symbology, and it's right above the feature group in my view here. So the first thing we do is this actually says override symbology. I choose, instead of no, I choose yes, I want to use override symbology. And I wait for a couple of seconds, and it allows me to select an override template. Now I'm talking about a terrain here. I have to remember the element that's selected is a terrain. And these templates are grouped by the type of civil element. So I expand terrain, and then I have access to all of the different feature definitions. And I'm going to choose existing contours. And we see immediately that we get these gray contour lines displayed. Now these lines will print. You can make a print of it, but they're not real graphics. They are calculated features, so they're kind of transient, and they operate differently. So this isn't a perfect picture, but I can label this information using the terrain tab of OpenSite. In the terrain tab in OpenSite, there is a labeling group, and I can label contours or I can label terrain spots. And I'm going to go ahead and just use label terrain spots. When I choose that command, my element selection tool changes. And it says terrain model not selected. Well, that's interesting. I'm going to look in the lower left corner, because in the lower left corner, it is prompting me for what I need to do to get this command to run. It says identify the terrain model. So that means over in the 2D view, select something that is displayed from the terrain. Just left click on it. I'm going to left click on a contour line. And we see that it picked up the name of my terrain model. Now it asks me to select the spot to label. So I'm just going to pick some spot that is, I thought I had a pipe, ditch, I don't know, something. Too much information being displayed. So let me find, here's a driveway. I'm just going to display, and there is a ditch line right there. It's identified as high ditch E86. And I actually do see, this is almost like analyze point. I see the label is incrementing, showing me the elevations at different areas. So if I left click right there, that says that's where my leader is going to go, and I can annotate the elevation. I'm still in the command. I'm going to hit the escape key on my keyboard, and then let's just investigate using the element selection tool. If I select this thing, it actually got placed as a note. It should be on a particular level. It's on the default level because that was my active level, so it's using the active level. But it's also, it's annotation text, so it will change size depending upon what my drawing scale is. So if I change my drawing scale, it will change size according to that. So just a way to throw some labeling in there. Trying to think of where we're going to go next. Give me just a second. I wanted to try to place one other type of annotation, and that is annotation that is used by the civil labeler. The civil labeler is part of the suite of tools that are available for creating plans. So it's under the Drawing Production tab. So if I change to the Drawing Production tab, you'll see a Labels group, and there's the Civil Labeler. So I'm going to choose the Civil Labeler. Now, in the Civil Labeler, we've got new groupings, Plan ADA. These are all ODOT is at the top with an underscore, and then we've got Plan ADA, Plan General, Plan Roadway, Plan Survey. Some of these things don't work the way you would expect them to work. And I invite you that if you are looking for a label and you can't find it, this is something that you should talk to your standards representative person about, or you can talk to East about it too, because we know this is an area that really needs some enhancement. This is some real great automatic labeling capability. There's no reason to have to use an analyze tool, write down an elevation, and then use the place note or place text command and type that information in. You want to be able to just access the civil data, and that's why this civil labeler is there. So let me go to the Plan Roadway and see that I can actually annotate alignment. That would be the alignment name, the station in its full station format. I can also annotate where an approach is. Let me try this one just for grins. I'm actually going to turn off the contours really quickly so I don't have to have them getting in my way. I'm going to select the terrain, and I'm going to say, no, I don't want to use symbology overrides, just to turn off the contours. Now I've also got some other stuff coming in that is coming from the corridor on a proposed level, coming from the corridor, so I can choose the corridor. And I'm just going to turn off some of these. Well, you know what? I'm going to turn off all the proposed levels just so that I don't have to see them. Actually, I like the lane line. Maybe I like edge of gravel. Nope, like the lane line. Let's do that. Okay, I'm interested in annotating where this driveway is. And it's a driveway approach. And it looks to me like it's gravel. That's a gravel feature. So let me annotate that. It does have a little asphalt approach, so maybe this should be annotated as an asphalt approach. I've got all three, asphalt, concrete, and gravel. So let's do asphalt. The way we run this is we select apron asphalt plus station. And if you want this big dialog box to get out of your way, you would choose this enable collapse mode. Personally, I'm just going to move it to the right. I'm not going to enable the collapse mode. I'm going to run this with the default settings just by choosing the place command. And I'm going to watch for prompts in the lower left corner of MicroStation. So I chose place, and I don't see a prompt. That's kind of bothersome to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this civil labeler, choose the element selection tool, and I'm going to launch the civil labeler again. I think it got stale because I was yammering on. Plan roadway, select the asphalt, choose place. Now in the lower left corner, I'm prompted to select or identify an alignment. So the alignment, if I take my mouse cursor and hover over the alignment, it says it's a complex element L. It's coming from the geometry pub 50 file, which is listed at the very bottom of that box that pops up. If I choose other things, it tells me that I could identify, yeah, this roadway lane line P, the travel lane 1. It doesn't actually have to be a stationed alignment. It could be a linear geometry, but I want that alignment that we have the stationing displayed on. So I'm going to left click to identify that as the alignment. And then I'm prompted to identify a point to label. Now, normally I would change my snap to midpoint and maybe select the midpoint of a line. But, well, let's try it. Let's try it. I'm going to left click on my key point snaps. I'm going to say I want to use my midpoint snap. And then I'm going to see if, oh yes, it does. Great. So what I'm trying to do here is find the midpoint of this asphalt approach. And I'm going to left click when I see the yellow X. Now it says I can place the label. Now this label is locked in to be perpendicular to the alignment at the point that I chose. So that's the station it's going to get, but it's also locked into that station. So I can drag this thing left or right. It's also going to be placed perpendicular to the alignment. You'll notice that, well, you probably don't know. This is my data set, and I know it pretty well. Stationing increases from the top to the bottom. So if I place this plus 0, 0 asp, I would expect it to be read a head-on line going up station, and it's displaying, backwards. But I'm going to go ahead and left click that I want it placed, right there. And it is. It's displayed 180 degrees from where I want it. And actually, some of these will depend upon the orientation of your plans as well. So you can change the rotation in the civil labeler. You can change the rotation from perpendicular to reverse perpendicular. There are some things that you can do. You have to try it out and see how it works. Because I don't know, I haven't tried it. I'm still in the command. It's asking me to identify yet another point to label. So I could say, well, I just want to label maybe that edge point, and now it wants me to place the label, and I'll place it out here. So you can see it's actually picking up the plus station of the point that I snapped to. So that edge was 8 feet away. Now, I'm going to exit the command. I'm going to actually hit escape to get out of the command. I'm going to close that. I'm going to relaunch it just for grins to see if I can change the way the command works. I like to start the command all over again. And let's tell it that I want it to be perpendicular reverse. That was something I wanted to try. So it says identify element to add to set, which is not exactly what the prompt that I was expecting. So I'm going to close this again, and launch it again until I get the correct prompts. This is a brand new tool, so there are a few pain points in using this tool. Place, oh, I didn't hit the place command. Okay, identify element. So that was my fault. So identify the element and then identify the point to label. Let me identify this other end, and I'm going to bring it out here, place it there, and it's still, so changing to perpendicular reverse did not flip that. But I encourage you, try some of these different rotations. There are also horizontal, and but lock perpendicular locks it actually to be perpendicular to the alignment at that point, which is kind of nice. Let's see if I uncheck lock perpendicular and come down here and say I want to label this point that is there. It's locked perpendicular. It was locked perpendicular, but what it did is it calculated what is perpendicular at the point that I snap to. But if I move it along the alignment and place it up here, it gives me the plus station way up here, but it's not aligned. So that's what lock perpendicular does. Lock perpendicular aligns it. And you can say, I want to label that point. And it also keeps it on the line. So lots of different ways to use these. You guys have a great rest of your day. We'll try to pick this up with some more OpenSite topics.